Okay, so this week is video discussion number 7. You guys can see it recording, right?
Mm-hmm. I think
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Okay, let's go through the slides. So this week's reading was very interesting. I think it's the most interesting reading that I've had thus far in this class. As far as it's eye-opening. Um, the reading I found a lot of good points throughout the reading, but here are the 5 I think it kind of stands out to me the most. The first one being the biggest obstacle in addressing and solving equity in mathematics education lies in understanding and negotiating the politics in their everyday practice. The second one is public education has been increasingly commercialized by the giant corporate America, such as Pearson, and other billionaires such as Betsy DeVos, who's the Secretary of Education in the United States, who often have very little to no expertise in public education. So this one, ever since I was in high school, I noticed how involved Pearson or other organizations, how involved are they and how much power they have over the public education. Like they kind of, especially I took HCC courses and a lot of them uses Pearson platform. You have to purchase, do the homework on there, and all kind of stuff. So I feel like they do have a very big presence. Also, the influence that they have onto the public education. The third point is Pearson, along with other giant corporations, have gained the power to directly create, administer, influence, what's the other one? And manipulate standardized testing process and results for the benefits of their own. Leaving very little significance to the school districts, teachers, and students. So I think Pearson is also involved in SATs testing and ACT testing. Like they manufactures practice test booklets and things like that. And they even have like the program. I was actually involved in one of those programs, the Pearson SAT preparation program, where you pay $700 for I think a 6 week long program where everything is Pearson, from the textbook to the mentor to the test taking techniques and all that. It was sponsored by Pearson. That's also one of the involvement that Pearson has, even on the SAT, which is I think it's the biggest standardized test in America. And the fourth bullet point is corporate America, such as Pearson, also gain control of the collection of data, such as exam scores, textbook usage, test preparation software, and programs for their own benefits, which includes ensuring that products are as widely used as possible, track down and coerce teachers and district into using Pearson product if they have not been already doing so. Coerce sounds a little harsh. Probably pressure sounds better. And the last bullet point is what we see nowadays is that is happening to school districts and public educations in general is the deprofessionalization and commercialization of education across the United States. This bullet points, I have this idea before I was even reading the article, which pretty sad. Throughout my high school experience and my community college experience and also my university experience, a lot of private entity are involved in the process of public education as far as testing concern, curriculum concern, and all that. Okay, so do you guys have anything to add on to these 5 bullet points?
I think you made a good point, that they kind of have taken over this whole idea of education. I know taking my science courses, even high school and college, I mean, I'm not sure that it was Pearson anymore, but it probably was.
Mm-hmm.
That they actually got a piece of our tuition so that we could access their products for free. So that we could go on there. It wasn't even about the teacher anymore. The teacher didn't really have to teach. They just said, oh, well, just go online to Pearson.com and go through these tutorials and work these problems, and then we'll take the test on Friday. And that was pretty crappy. A pretty crappy way of educating people, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Kim and Nora, you want to add anything?
So I think that the more that they have, the more money that they have, because of in the processing of become a teacher, they force the teacher to kind of like upload their lesson planning, the book of the book uses that you just said about, and so they can be able to control whatever that the teachers teach, and then they can be able to profit themselves. So with that kind of power, with that amount of money that they're getting every year, I think that they're going to become more so powerful. And so I don't know, future generations, how would they be able to, have a better sort of education? Because it's kind of like something that they control everything. So they pretty much just control every source of knowledge, because they print the knowledge out as books, and then they kind of control teachers' salary as well, because they are the one that deciding who's going to be in this profession as a teacher. Mm-hmm. So that's become a very scary thing.
Yeah, that was covered in the article, wasn't it, about how they kind of decide a teacher's salary because they're writing the tests that show if a teacher is effective or not. And we already did the other one about how effective standardized tests really are. So there's a lot of fallacies in the way things work.
True.
Right, and it was interesting that they pointed out that it's a cycle. It's almost a positive feedback loop, where if they make the exams harder, the students will score lower, and so then the schools are going to pay them more for the study materials, and since they're so invested, they're going to keep working with them, and then it just keeps going. When I was when I was reading this, I was thinking about, I have a cousin who's just starting school, I think kindergarten or first grade, and I was talking with my aunt, his mom, and she's a librarian and she works in school libraries, and she's noticing that there's more of a push for using technology in education, which there's good and bad in it, but she's worried, and as she should be, that they're pushing to replace schools and classrooms with technology and virtual classrooms. And that would mainly benefit corporations like Pearson. And it would really take away a lot of the benefits there are in face-to-face classrooms that students have and a lot of students need, because schools are often their only resource to get it's their only resource for a lot of things, for there's equity issues essentially. But
yeah. I agree with Nora about the part in the article, what they mentioned, when students first take the test or a series of tests, their scores are really low, and that was to kind of pressure the teachers and the school districts into purchasing more of their products so they can practice and get a better scores on those tests. And the smart thing about them is that they have gained such power and influence in the education, we call it an industry now, in the education industry, sadly, that if you don't do good on a Pearson revised test, then you're more likely not a good candidate for certain jobs or anything like that. So definitely they manipulate kind of thing like that. And as I was reading this article, it reminded me of last semester I took a course at U of H. It's called Personal Finance, Basically, they teach you how to save money, invest money, spend money wisely. And the first 2 weeks of class, the professor required us to spend, I think, up to like $120 just for an access code for Pearson. And I was just like, how are you going to teach about saving money and you're asked us to spend money, like hundreds of dollars on this product, on an access code, which is pretty ridiculous. And I feel like it's probably not in his power to decide whether or not he uses that in his classroom. But it's just a sad reality now. Especially, I was in HEC, and exactly like Landon said, professor just tell you to create a Pearson account, purchase an access code, which costs like $75, and then just do everything on day, and then you take the test. It's so formulaic, like the education system has become. Like they're just procedures, and you just follow these, and bam, you get a degree at the end. It's like baking a cake. Everything's exactly the same, and that's just sad.
Yeah. They made the recipe for a piece of paper that costs $25,000
Yep.
at the small number.
That's right.
So I kind of have this weird kind of thinking that, I mean, in a way that, okay, so I studied for the PAC test, for ACT. And then because of Pearson, I have a source of, something to be able to review on and then be able to pass the test. And even though they are the one that create the test, but because of that, I could be able to, continue with ACT. So I think that I could be able to see why people are angry, like teachers are angry because Pearson control everything. But it's also as, for me as a specifically only for the purpose of passing the PAC test, I think that it's not as bad of an idea, to have Pearson as a source of something to study for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe that it's not. So I think that the purposes that they have in the beginning was here, just to help students to do something good on the test. But as they become more profitable, their ambitious, their dreams just become bigger to the point that they want to replace the ACT test.
Definitely.
And it's not that we as a teacher let it happen, but also the state let it happen, the school let it happen. It's not, it's they make profit because somebody let them, someone powerful let that happen.
Mm-hmm. And I thought this article was written a long time ago, but then when I got to the part where it mentioned Betsy DeVos was the Secretary of Education, so I was like, oh wow, it was written pretty recently. So what do you guys think about her? Because she's pretty controversial as the Secretary of Education.
I don't know much about her. I haven't looked into her.
Oh, she comes from a very, very well-off family, and her family and herself have been donating to the Republican Party for a long time, and she has no experience with education. So when she got the position, I think Trump kind of nominated her, and when she got the position, and she was, I don't know, testify is the right word, in front of the Senate, pretty much all of the representatives, they tore her down. Oh, you have no experience, you don't know what you're doing, you're cutting budgets in education and things like that. Why do you think you qualify for this job? And I think that's what's wrong with the education system in general. It's just corrupted as much as other, I don't want to say industries, but like healthcare is also, being influenced by corporate America. So, and I think it's really hard for teachers to kind of combat that influence by ourselves. It has to do with the school levels and districts and even the states level.
Yeah.
but those corporations force the school administrators, administration to purchase their products. So it's in a way that I think that the school is kind of stuck in a position where they can move forward or they can back off.
Yeah.
They stuck,
They
and teachers are blaming, the school administration because you didn't do anything. You just stay there. But I mean, at a middle guy, I don't think that the district or the school should be able to do anything.
True.
So it's like a circle of blaming, and the top persons that be able to make changes for education, they don't want to because they want to spend budgets on some other things like military, fighting immigrants, like that instead of education. Well, I don't want to be getting too into politics because that gonna take a long time. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because like a lot of the article was talking about how teaching is very political and how math is also very political in its own way. Like talking about Betsy DeVos, the whole thing about her becoming the Secretary of Education, it was really just billionaires helping billionaires. A lot of the budgets that she's cutting are the ones that are benefiting people who need it the most. She's cutting budgets from, if I remember right, she's cutting budgets from programs that are supposed to help students with disabilities, students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But she's giving more funding towards private schooling, and basically it's the rich helping get the benefits for the rich, and they don't really care about what the consequences are for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as being stuck, a lot of the article was talking about how it's very important that potential teachers should not just learn about pedagogy and their content knowledge, but also about the politics of schooling. Because then if we go into the politics of teaching, if we go into a school with that political knowledge, then we're better prepared to stand up for what we believe is right for our students, because that's the priority that we have as teachers. One technique that I found was really interesting. It was a term that was used to describe what principals would do to defend their teachers if they got in trouble. If the teacher was teaching their content a certain way that the district wasn't really approving of, I believe it was creative, not intervention. I want to say it's a term like when Gandhi was doing his protests, or like similar to civil disobedience. There was a term in there. I just can't remember it. That's why I was saying Gandhi. It's like I know this. It's related to this term. But basically, it's referring to how teachers and principals find creative ways to go around the district's restrictions that are being driven by political agendas, which are influenced by billionaire companies paying them. Like one example was, I remember that there was a video that went viral on Facebook of this teacher who teaches health to his students, and teaching sex ed is a very controversial topic, and so I believe at his school it wasn't really allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So what he did was he taught his students how to put a sock on. So if you can get the analogy. So I think that would be a good example of that. But yeah, so there are ways, but I definitely think that one key point from here that's a good idea is making sure that teachers who are learning to become teachers, like potential teachers, learn political knowledge and learn about the politics of teaching, which I think our program is doing a pretty good job since they gave us this article to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's another one of those things that the better prepared you are for what's coming, the better answer you'll have for it when it gets there. right? I doubt he came up with this sock idea that same morning. They're like, oh, guess what? You can't do that. Oh, well, I'll just use a sock instead. He probably saw it coming sometime before that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And one more corrupt thing about it is textbook, because a lot of these corporations, they write textbook, and in college, I'm pretty sure you guys encounter this. Professor always asks you to get the latest edition of a textbook, when the old edition is always cheaper, and it's pretty much the same thing. They just kind of change up like the questions orders so that they like pressure or coerce you into buying the latest edition, which is more expensive. I think that's very corrupted, because I myself spent like hundreds on textbook throughout my college career, and I kind of find a lot of cheaper way to do that, but for other people, they purchase the original textbooks, so it probably costs thousands for them to just get textbook alone.
You could buy them at the campus bookstore also.
Yeah, which is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Math textbooks.
So that is something that I don't understand. Like, as a student, you have to have like a full-time 12 credit hours. So you pretty much a full-time student. You work a little bit. So like, say that if you are a waiter or a waitress, how much money you can be that you make to be able to afford tuition for class and textbooks. Like, I literally struggled back then when I had to buy books that cost like up to $500 for 4 classes.
Mm-hmm.
That is insane. And I mean, we are students, we don't have enough money. Why do they think that we would be able to afford to buy books? The latest version of books that cost a couple hundred.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes one class you have to have at least 2 books, or a book and some Pearson access codes, and that is insane.
Yes, it's very corrupted, and I don't think. Well, it has to do with the school and the teacher, but the major part of it has to do with the pressure from these corporations that they placed onto these academic institutions.
Yeah, and sometimes it is the professor. I've heard stories of professor will write a new book every 2 or 3 years, and then demand that his students have his newest book.
Yep,
and so every 2 or 3 years, he gets a big pay upgrade because his book sales go through the roof. So
that's one of the most ridiculous things.
Yeah. I never had one of those professors, but I've heard the stories of them. So
my sisters had a professor like that. It was really weird because she had to buy the book off of a very shady website, but the professor definitely wrote the book. Yeah. On the other side of that, I think that if teachers take into account their students' well-being first, they're able to find a way, they're on the front lines, then they're probably in the most powerful position to help students in things like that. Like for our courses, what was it? I think or at least for the ACP program, I don't know if you guys are in the undergraduate program with the college, but the only book that I had to purchase was the Teaching Strategies 2.0, which was like $35. Mm-hmm. And then at the very beginning of the course, when they were talking about the scholarship, they were trying or at least to me, it seemed like they were trying their best to show us ways that we could save money. Like if you go to the wellness center at the beginning of the semester and tell them that you're not going to go to the gym, you can get that $200 back from student fees. Yeah. They were telling us that at the orientation.
I didn't hear that. Can I still do it? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Not for this semester, but for next semester, like towards the end of this semester, or ask them at the beginning of the semester. You go to the financial office and they can take it off for you.
How much? How many bucks?
$200.
Oh, wow. I am so doing that. Thank you. Sorry,
no problem.
5 seconds off topic.
No, it's okay. But I've had professors who...
I thought it was mandatory fees.
Well, that's the whole thing about the university, just not caring about the students' financial situations and really just trying to crank out as much money as they can out of us. But it is within our right to go and ask them for that $200 back if you're not going to use the gym.
I see.
Yeah, but I have had professors. Yeah, I've had professors who made sure that they got textbooks that were free to access online, like there were PDFs that you could get legally. Or they do say you can just get the older edition of this book because that's all the content that we're going to do. So in some ways, I think teachers do have, well, no, professors in the university setting. I don't know about teachers in ISDs because the school is the one that's providing those books.
Mhm.
But that's just a thought. We still have ways where we could probably help students find resources or save money when they need to.
Okay.
That's
Now
good news.
we're gonna move on to the key lines. Now the first quotes, I think I don't really fully understand it, but it's by judging it, it sounds really profound. So here it is. We treat mathematics as if it is a natural reflection of our universe. When we identify mathematics in the world around us, we convince ourselves that mathematics occur outside of human influence, rather than recognizing that we may see patterns we want to see. That's also called bias. We instead feel mathematics is a way of encoding the universe with eternal truths, a natural order of things that should not be questioned. I think that's says a lot, a natural order of things that should not be questioned. And also, mathematics is viewed as a version of the world that is proper, separated from humans, where no emotions or agendas take place. What do you guys think about that quote? Because there's a lot going on in that quote.
Yeah, I remember reading over that one, and to me, it felt like they were trying to tell us that that this idea that math always has a right answer, and it's not like your other subjects like English and reading and you know
Hmm.
that math has a right answer and a right way to do it, and it's absolute. But they're trying to make this argument that it's not absolute because we made the rules of math, and it's very easy for someone to change the rules of math. I think they discussed it later in the article also when they're talking about treating math like a game. You have to teach the student how to play the game of math, or you can teach the student how to change the rules of the game of math. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm sure you all dealt with it also. The especially in mathematics, the my way or the highway teacher. Show your work, do this step, that step, and third step, and then there's your answer. And sometimes there are kids out there who can figure out the answer, but they don't have to do those that's in the same way. There's people can get creative with it, but that's not allowed in the education system, usually at least.
And I think what that does is it kind of, how to say it, kind of leads us to this way of thinking where we have to follow the established routes that people teach us to go. And if we do any other unconventional way, even if we arrive at the same exact solutions, that's still considered wrong or, not conventional or not traditional. And I think that's kind of why I say math is also politics. That's what I get out of this quote.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay, you guys want to add anything before I move on to the second one?
The only thing that comes to mind is that, like, when I was studying statistics, towards the end of our course, we were discussing how the Association of Statisticians was basically saying, stop using p-values. And that occurs to me because, like, the quote is talking about how we look at math as like this pure entity. It's non-biased, it's objective, you can't be wrong.
Mhm.
But the whole thing with p-values, if you've ever taken statistics, is like you always want a p-value that's less than 0.05. But there's so many different ways to manipulate numbers to have that happen. Plus, with like more and more data, the more and more data you get, the more likely you're going to get that result. And so it's really stagnating how much our knowledge in the community is growing, because everyone in research in biology, chemistry, physics, they're all just stuck to like, okay, we need to just get that p-value to be as small as it can be. And if it is, then that means we're right. But that's not necessarily the case. In statistics, one of the biggest rules is you can never say that you're 100% sure that this is wrong or this is right. But people treat it that way. And so like, I feel like that's a really good example of people having that misconception of math being unquestionable.
Mm-hmm. And I remember my high school teacher, she said when she was in school, in college, there actually was a course named How to Lie with Statistics. So well, I feel the same. There are multiple ways for you to kind of manipulate the statistic to support your own arguments or claims or things like that. Kind of like you pick and choose the statistics that fits your agenda. So I feel like numbers do lie sometimes if you're able to manipulate it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've heard of, you've all heard of creative accounting, right? Creative accounting, 67% of all statistics are made up. There's examples out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of like that you said that, Val. That was good.
And Trump is a master at manipulating statistics. if you guys watch him. Okay. The second quote is, so many people are walking around society who have experienced traumas, microaggressions from participating in math classroom, where ideas of being a successful person, an intelligent person, or is removing oneself from the context, not involving emotions, nor involving the body, and being judged by whether one can reason abstractly. I think I mentioned this to you guys before. If you're good at math and people call you smart, but if you're good at art, if you can draw well, if you can sing well, people never call you smart. They call you something else, like artistic or something like that. And I think that fits this quote really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when they say not involving emotions, and which is kind of like, how should I say, kind of like making us robots or something. It's like math is something cold and either right or wrong. There's one answer. There's no way around it or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I read that line, it was more, I guess, almost clarifying, because when they first started talking about math as being political, I wasn't sure whether they were talking about like the formulas and theorems that we learned, because if that's political, that's going to be really complicated. But for me, I interpreted, like, after I read that line, it's like, okay, they're talking about math status in teaching and basically in different fields, not necessarily the math itself, although they did mention how it's very Eurocentric when they talk about the origins of math, but that's a little bit different. This helped clarify, that line and other related ones helped clarify for me that when they're talking about math being political, they're talking about the status of math. Just like how in the first line they're talking about it being objective and pure and unquestionable. And then for this one, it's, I guess what I can think of is I actually had observations earlier today that I could relate this with. There were two classes that I went into, one the same lesson, two different teachers. The first teacher her students felt very discouraged, and I was sitting towards the back and I could hear their comments, and a lot of them had questions, but they didn't feel like they had the right to ask, because the teacher was very focused on just, you have to do it this way, my way or the highway kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then the other teacher teaching the exact same lesson, she was encouraging students um, to give answers, whether they're right or wrong, to ask questions, to make connections. And so I guess the idea is that in the first teacher's classroom, math seemed like just very methodical. And it's just whether you're good at it or not is based off of whether you can think the exact same way that she's teaching it. But then in the other one, math isn't just about that. It's about making connections and finding relationships. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. I don't know if I've just gone off on a tangent here, but for some reason I was thinking of that when I read the quote.
Yeah, it actually applies to what you were saying, because, well, it's a good thing that you see a good example and a bad example when you're observing. My teacher, when I observed, I was sitting in the back, and you know how students usually when they sit in the back, they don't really pay attention to the teacher or they don't really do their work. But the classroom that I was in with the teacher, she had command of the entire classroom. You know, all her students, even the ones sitting in the back, are actually doing their work, and she is very flexible with very flexible with how students arrive at the answer, as long as they understand the process of it. So I think that kind of ties into this article where, you know, students should be able to think freely as long as they are, you know, as long as they're able to arrive at the correct solution, instead of being all formulaic and, you know.
And extremely regimented.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think the most part is some of the teachers, they don't have a math background, so they're just being a teacher, and then because math teachers are very demanding, that's why school put some teacher into teaching math. So because they don't have a math background, that's why they just do by the book, and they're afraid that if the student got another way to solve a problem, he might think that, well, it's not by the book, so this is not the way that I read the book. This is not the way that I learned, so it must be wrong. So I think that it's coming from that kind of thinking that would lead to my way or highway, and also that would kind of prevent students from freely thinking or learning or having a right meaning of learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where it comes from.
True, I agree.
On the flip side of that, there are teachers who are like super professional, like they're very good at what they do in math, but as far as teaching it, they're not that good because at least the way that I think about it is that if for the teachers who are my way or the highway and who are really, really good at math, they're probably that good because that's the way that they learned it and they were successful at it. And so they're just trying to do what they feel like worked for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to manipulate the numbers the way some of their students might be able to.
And you know where
that one way.
Yeah. You know where that happens a lot? University. A lot of teachers are researchers, and they know materials like the back of their hand, but they just cannot teach it to students. Like, they know it themselves, but they just can't spread it to students or even other people. And a lot of teachers are like that. I can testify it. You know, I took a math course. I'm not going to say it. The department chair taught it, and he knew the material. He knew the entire thing just by the back of his hand, but he just cannot teach it to the class. Like, he fails to spread the knowledge, you know, even though he knows it really well. Yeah, it just reminds me of it. Don't look up who's the department chair at the math department.
I think I know what you're talking about.
It wouldn't make any difference to me, so.
Okay, and the last two quotes, I think it has to, basically what it's saying is the way we address and combat this equity in mathematics education, we have to work together as teachers, as school districts, parents, and students. And also, it takes a long time to change the system. You know, it's a very gradual process. that we have to take, and it's going to be multi-generational. You know, it doesn't just happen overnight or in a short period of time.
Hmm. It takes a day and a half to break it down, but it takes decades to rebuild it.
Yes, it takes decades of, you know, building up, tearing down, improving, all of that.
Hmm.
But it's worth it. Okay, so these are the 3 points that I got out of the reading. It is our responsibilities to educate ourselves and students around the world, about the world around us, being able to question the authority, to challenge the validity of information, and to have an open mindset and ever-learning mentality, and to build relationship and connections with our students. This will help the student to not think that test scores define their ability to succeed, you know. And I think, you know, having a strong bond with our student as far as teacher-student relationship goes, it really strengthened the quality of teaching and the quality of learning. Because I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when you're in a classroom with your students, both of the teacher and the student both do the learning and both do the teaching. It's a very flexible role or identity. So, you know, I feel like the more, as often as I remember that fact, I'm going to be able to improve myself daily. The second is it is imperative that our students are not only equipped with all the necessary theoretical knowledge, but also mastering the skill sets that will help them succeed in life. You know, a grade doesn't define it. You know, school system these days, they don't teach you how to balance a budget, how to file a tax, and things like that, or even how to think freely, or how to not be biased when, you know, when you read a piece of article, or, you know, how to even challenge your own belief system. So it's very important because if you think about it, if you want to change the system, they're going to be the ones who change the system, not us. We're just facilitating the process. So the better we equip them, the more successful and the faster things gonna be. And the last point is we as teachers need to actively work with the school, the districts, parents and students, and even local government, especially if you can find nonprofit organization to combat against the commercialization and manipulation of education that's being perpetuated by the giant corporations who benefits billions of dollars in revenues, but they don't contribute anything significant to our education system, like Pearson. You know, it keeps going back to Pearson.
That was the example in the reading. So I
Yeah,
guess you could say McGraw Hill or
true, McGraw.
yeah.
College Board.
What was that?
College Board.
I don't think I know.
They're the ones who write the SAT, PSAT, and the AP exams.
Yeah.
Concord?
College Board, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, pretty much since we're a capitalism country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you think about it, with the way our economy operates, everything always traces back to the money. You know, especially for corporations. You know, whenever they see profits, they're gonna cling on to it. And I think that's one of the reasons why standardized testing are so increasingly important as far as, you know, college admissions go, or even medical school admissions and all that goes. And I feel like, you know, I have a thought. Maybe the reason why I scored low on the SAT the first time is because they purposely kind of like lower my score so I can take their programs and things like that.
I think you're right. That was all their fault.
You guys want to add anything onto that?
Um,
Or is there any other implications that you guys got out of the reading or the video?
I wasn't able to access the video.
Me too. I wasn't able to.
But the implications, I think, sums it up very well. Especially, I like the point too. I had one of the quotes here that I think connects really well. Um, Potential teachers who have developed political conocimientos understand that more than just getting all kids to perform better or the same on tests of achievement, we should be invested in helping students become the kinds of people they want to be, fulfilling goals they have decided for themselves, which can mean different, not same outcomes.
I kind of like that one.
Me too.
I kind of goes when I was reading it, it made me think of something like that part, because it kind of feels like you're helping a student, learn what they want to learn, and the best way to have them learn what they learn or what they want to learn is to actually have them enjoy the material. Sometimes you help them to enjoy what they need to learn, and sometimes you help them to learn what they want, what they already enjoy learning. But going back to swim coaching, I feel like that's my primary job when I get a new swimmer is to do my best to help that swimmer learn to love the sport. Because once they love the sport, then they're going to be in there and they're going to want to work hard. They're going to want to listen to me when I tell them something new. And it makes a big difference when they're doing it because they want to and not just because they have to.
True.
So the video is having a very good explain or implication of how you can be able to have a deep learning or deep understanding of a context. So it's kind of like what we already talked in class in CI and MTS, that you have to have a meaningful lesson. You're gonna have to be flexible of the way that you how you be able to present your context. You have to understand that there's going to be challenges, and you kind of have to ease into to resolve the challenges that you may face to be able to create like a meaningful that leads to deeper understanding or deeper learning for the students. Pretty much that what it said for the video.
Yeah, our master teacher do a really good job at coaching us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. For the questions, I only have one question. I came across this quote in the reading, and it's a public school teacher know they must work with every student who walks through their doors. Instead of on the opposite side with the private school teacher, they can always cast out a student or expel them if they wanted to. As such, part of teacher work is creating a counter narrative to stories of students not having enough grit. So my question was, I don't really understand what counter narrative means in this context.
It's basically like building a story that combats the story of students not having enough grit. It's like combating deficit thinking. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So counter narrative is like a solution to.
It's like building up your own story that opposes the one that they're talking about.
Yeah, it's reversing the process. For however long the student's been told that he doesn't have enough grit, and he just needs to do better. But it's now your job to start writing a new story that will make him feel like he does have enough grit, and hence, hopefully, he or she will be more inspired to do the part and with your adequate help, hopefully. Something like that.
Okay, you guys have any questions with the reading?
I only mentioned mine before, whether when they were talking about math being political, if they were honestly talking about the formulas and stuff, or just like the position of math in when we're talking about it.
I think it has to do with the way math is taught, because they mention it throughout the text.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
I thought so.
Yeah, and some of the statements that the author made in the reading, I didn't really understand, nor did I really agree with. But that has entirely to do with my personal belief. You know, I need to challenge it and see which one makes more sense.
Hmm.
Okay, I think we're hitting the 45 minutes mark, right?
Oh, we're well past it.
Yeah.
Okay, how do I stop?
Um,
Pause. Stop recording, right?
yes.